Yeah. So I'm Bill. I've been in the space for about 8 years now, full time, but really got into Ethereum when I read smart contracts in 2016 when I was finishing up law school and kind of saw the writing on the door that eventually, like blockchains and probably this new Ethereum thing would be really like the global coordination settlement layer, especially for finance, because so much of like finance and law is really like people in these cubicles in like New York, New Jersey, Ohio, wherever, pushing paper around and updating spreadsheets and databases. And blockchain makes all of that automatic, transparent, verifiable. So I practiced as a lawyer for a couple of years and then jumped full time into Web3 startup world, first as part of Consensus when they were still a venture studio. Uh, was working on kind of DAOs for politics and social movements, which is how I met Deacon and Sam and Ven and what was that time Odyssey, because they were working on the earliest versions of DAO House. And so, my startup peeps went through a few iterations, but also worked closely with DAO House folks on kind of the DAO House V2 platform, Moloch V2, and extending that. Then Moloch V3. Spent a couple years at Opolis, which did some payroll and benefits for mostly DAO workers at the time. They ended up switching back to Web 2, so I moved to Game 7, which was a DAO focused on the gaming space and built their community platforms on the product side. And then more recently, have moved to working with Protocol Labs on this team for their alignment asset, which is still in beta, but the idea behind the alignment asset is that contributions to the network can result in an ownership stake in the network. And for those who don't know, Protocol Labs is actually like this innovation network with hundreds of companies and thousands of, founders, researchers, engineers, all types of folks. So it's a really exciting experiment to see, can you build a better innovation network? Can you go beyond like what a YC or, you see at colleges like Stanford have done by creating some incentives for people to coordinate more and really kind of help each other succeed, especially getting through that kind of like valley of despair that hits so much frontier tech like Web3 or any of the other focuses for Protocol Labs, which is also like neurotech and AI and some other pretty exciting stuff. So just joined that project. It's exciting thus far and really hoping that it'll be a model for how other kind of innovation networks and communities can really incentivize knowledge sharing and people helping each other out. Startups are a lonely, difficult business. So the more help and more community you can build around yourself, the better.
Yeah. That's really, I want to hear some more about that in a little bit, but yeah, thanks for the taking me down memory lane a little bit.
I know.
Been around a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in your current stuff that you're working on here, I guess. Hold on, let me pull up my questions. How is AI kind of changing what you're doing? And I guess it's like directly incorporated in some ways, but how are you, I guess, personally adapting as well on top of the stuff you're working on
Yeah.
using AI?
I mean, I think it's changed my workflow and just kind of what I work on day to day quite a bit. And in some ways, it's brought me back closer to what being a startup founder was like, even though, I'm a product person on a team. Because when I was building Peeps and was just resource constrained and doing a little bit of everything. I was doing like everything from talking to potential users to trying to build the front end to doing smart contracts to like writing strategy docs and pitch decks and all of that. And for a while, like product management focused a little bit more on like writing docs, creating roadmaps, reviewing wireframes from designers, and then coordinating with the engineers and writing all the user stories and things and tickets they needed to actually execute on it, and then kind of testing with users and getting feedback. And really, AI has collapsed all of that so that as a product person, I can do a lot more by myself a lot quicker. And that means my workflow has essentially evolved into this series of like skills and tools I use, where I start with either like a PRD or a PR FAQ. And really for me, it's like just a brain dump into Claude. And then I have a skill that organizes it and writes it into a PRD that like as part of the PRD setup creates a bunch of prompts for Claude Code and like a multi-agent orchestration pathway. I review the PRD a couple times, usually edit, get rid of the like 10% that's hallucinations or like funky feature choices. But then, yeah, I just like put it in a folder and I'm like, hey, Claude Code, go after this. And I do have like this Obsidian knowledge graph system that kind of provides a set of principles for Claude Code in terms of software architecture, what tools to use, testing frameworks, all of that. So it is like a little bit more constrained. But usually the PRD is good enough, plus that like governance system over Claude Code to not quite one shot a prototype, but get like a decent prototype done in a few hours. And from there, it's, kind of that like slog of the last 20% where you're fixing bugs or like adjusting this and that and going back and forth Claude Code. But yeah, it allows me to get out a prototype that's really, really performant and can be tested with users.
Yeah, that's
and
what
so
and that's why I initially reached out, because you had shared your PRD skill on LinkedIn or something, and so that's interesting because that aligns with a lot of how I work too. But usually to get to that kind of like MVP, I start just with the brain dump. I'm trying to just like get it at even more like a scaffold kind of point. And then as I'm adding features, it's kind of like I iterate recursively through that same model. It's like, okay, build a feature spec and a checklist. And now once I'm okay with it, then it's like, go ahead and do it, And there's always that last 20% though, for sure.
Yeah. And I found like web apps are a lot easier for Claude to build and test and be like iterative on its own than mobile apps, just because of how hard it is to really test mobile apps. But I think it's like pretty good. And the newer tool that I've added in as like an intermediary is Claude Design. I think like you just get a better front end experience from that for some reason. So my PRD skill like also includes a Claude Design prompt, but then you can just like pull that design into your application that you've scaffolded and say like, here's the front end, copy this, like click for click. And then it kind of reads the PRD, fills in any gaps, and also like builds the back end to do what it needs to do. And so it's amazing just like how fast you can work and build, especially at the prototype phase. I've also built some things that like incorporate payments or auth. And I do think like that's where it still takes longer and you like get into real DevOps world and security consideration world.
Yeah.
So I definitely think like especially not being truly an engineer by training, like the AI stuff is great for prototyping and quick feedback. It's still got a ways to go before it ever replaces even like engineers for a simple application, much less like engineers that need to think about like queuing and caching and efficient data and like really being able to scale to hundreds of thousands of concurrent users.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah, and even
that
just like the deployment, it is pretty impressive though. Like when you do hook it up to Cloudflare or Railway or something like that, and it's just like, oh, I'm authenticated here. Okay, let me just deploy and set this up.
yep.
But there's still like, you kind of need to know how to prompt, and then what it should be doing, and kind of zooming out and thinking about the the roadmap, the architectural roadmap, for sure. So you
Yeah.
said,
And
oh yeah, go ahead.
I think I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of great engineers that have got a sense of like what tools are right for what and some of the trade-offs. So like when to go with Cloudflare or when to start with just like Supabase or
Uh huh.
um, these other like
Just a
just
SQLite DB or something. Um,
yeah, and yeah.
oh yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, just like I do think like having some engineering like knowledge and really understanding how apps are built is still really important.
Yeah. So you said that you're using Claude mainly. Do you usually mainly use Cloud Code? Or are there any other kind of tools that you're using locally?
So I haven't used really any of the local like open source LLMs. I do use Gemini and some of the Google AI tools, especially for more visual stuff
Hmm.
and videos. I think it's like slightly better. And then, I also use like OpenAI for some of their deep research pieces if I want to like go deep into an industry, more from like a product research analytics perspective. I think deep research is pretty fantastic. Um, and I've tried like OpenClaw and Hermes and all of these other like um,
Harnesses.
yeah, like harnesses for more personal assistance agents. And within like Protocol Labs, there's one that like is available to the team that we all use that's like honestly pretty useful. But on the personal side, I just like haven't figured out a use case for it because most of the annoying stuff I have to do is more like IRL stuff. Like if I could get an agent to mow my grass, that'd be awesome. But until that day, I just like don't have enough going on.
Yeah. So I was
The
thinking
personal,
about that too.
yeah,
The narrative is kind of like executives are going to fire all the workers because, they can do it much cheaper with agents. But I think it's actually really flipped. It's like the agents will become the executives, and all the workers and the interns and the people that can mow the grass are going to
yeah,
be like, hopefully a future of maybe like shared ownership, but we'll see. Um,
yeah.
are you using anything like VS Code or Cursor or Codex?
So I think it's just because I know VS Code and that's what I've used for years. So I run everything through VS Code at this point. I've used Cursor a little bit. It was it was like fine. Um, I think like if I were new to coding completely, it probably would have been what I've went for. But just because I like know VS Code and have it set up the way I like it, it's just easier to work in like a terminal in VS Code for me and be able to like find the files in the same way I used to find them to make little tweaks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I've stuck with.
Well, I'm so with this PRD process, I'm kind of interested in. I thought it was in the mentioning how you're kind of collapsing down the process, and that's kind of a bit of adapting to the new world. Can you expand a little more on what that means?
Yeah. So I think the big difference is like rather than having these like long sessions where I'd review a PRD with the team and engineers who never love to read those, and then break it into tickets. And again, engineers like never love to read tickets. What I can do is build a like prototype of the application and or feature and show it to an engineer, and we can go through it together, and then they can kind of take it and like productionize it and build it in a real way. And especially at like game 7 and summon, over the past year, that's what I started to do with engineers as we had these like little prototypes we'd do or features we'd want to spin up. I would just like vibe code a prototype, sometimes just like a front end prototype, but that way they could see exactly like what I was getting at. And I'd still give them the PRD and the tickets and everything. But for them, it was so much easier to go off that prototype. And then it also left room for them to make improvements, which I think like a lot of engineers are, I mean, brilliant people, but some engineers also have some like really good product sense. And if they can be freed up from writing boilerplate code or going back and forth with the PM on like what actually needs to be built, they can take what the PM did and make it like one iteration better already. And that was a really cool experience to see.
That's interesting. Have you had issues in that case with scope creep? This happens to me all the time. I'm like, well, I could add this and this and this and this, in the prompt, but
yeah, I think that's like the new risk. And I've been working with a friend on a kind of side project that's very AI heavy. And I think like the magic of AI coding can become almost like a little addictive. In the same way they talk about how like AI is just positive reinforcement machine for if when people use it for therapy. I think it's also like that for developers a little bit. And so you get these like really bloated, complicated apps if you're not careful. And I think like the magic is still, and this is probably where good product people still have jobs. Like the magic is in figuring out like the really simple, delightful experience and minimizing features. Because otherwise, like every vibe coded app is going to look like Salesforce or one of those just like monster apps that everybody hates to use and only uses if they absolutely have to.
yes, I definitely run into that. And EC is probably, he also works and product ownership and management, so he's probably agreeing and nodding his head on a lot of things. Yeah, so besides, well, one of the questions I'm asking people is, where do you think this is going? It's changed so much even in the last 6 months. Where do you think it leads? Both specifically in your field, but also more generally. And is it optimistic or is the end near?
I think I'm mixed, and like there are two elements. There's like the technology element, and then there's like the cultural political moment, which like on the technology side, I'm much more bullish, and not because I think we're going to hit AGI anytime soon. I still have this like gut feeling that we're 2 or 3 like big innovation leaps away from anything like that, and it'll probably take like another 20, 50, 100 years. I do think like what we've seen is this like huge improvement and huge democratization of being able to build software, kind of in the same way like we've seen smaller leaps towards this in my lifetime. Like when I was a kid wanting to build websites, like it was kind of beginning of cloud or like pre-cloud days even.
Mhm.
And so,
AVX.
yeah, it was like, okay, if I want to host a website, I either like have to sit with the constraints of GeoCities or get a server, right? And that's a big lift. And then even like AWS was a huge lift for like a non-developer versus these like Vercel and Railway made it so much easier. And, vibe coding and these AI tools have just done the same thing. I think they like make it a lot easier to create an application, to do like research. They just like shorten the timeline on everything and reduce a lot of busy work. And I think that leaves a lot more space for like the creativity, the taste, the human judgment, the human connection. So that's where I'm like very bullish on what we're doing, like what the technology is and how it'll change like the tech industry, but also like democratize. I think like one of the other side project I've worked on with this friend, like we've been able to do some consulting and work for these like small executive search firms that would be totally economically infeasible if we didn't have AI coding assistance, because we're really building software for like 3 or 4 people at a time. And I think that like just unlocks a lot of power and possibility for small businesses and for individuals. Like the political cultural moment, I think like AI is being blamed for a lot of layoffs that were probably going to come anyway. And I am like worried about the AI bubble, because I think like a lot of these companies have raised on the promise of like AGI. But we'll see. Like I think, you know, in the same way like the internet ended up being a mixed bag in many ways, I think like AI will be too. So there'll be some really like glorious democratization pieces to it, and then there'll be some like greedy bad things.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Well, thanks again for coming in. We're hitting the 30-minute mark, so I try to
Yep.
make sure that in case you have to drop or whatever.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
So if if you have any questions, you might be able to squeeze it in real quick. And Bill, thanks again for coming by. If you have some links like to your skill that you released,
Yep.
or your X profile or LinkedIn or any of those things, share them in the chat, and or these side projects. They all sound super interesting.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely will.
Thanks. You got something real quick?
Well, I mean, one thing that I thought was kind of funny was the mention of the Hermes and OpenClaw stuff, like not really being useful, because I feel like I've experienced that where it's been so hyped up, but every time I touch it, like it's cool, but I don't really have a use case for it. It's like I'm searching endlessly for a reason to use this thing, and it, I guess kind of leads to a question of like, what is another thing you're kind of looking at that seems like it's a little bit hypey that you're excited to test out? Like, is there anything on the horizon that like, okay, once I get around to it, this is the kind of thing that I want to experiment with? Because at least for myself, I've got like a long queue of stuff that I want to get to eventually to experiment with. So curious what's at the top of your queue.
Top of the queue is like really getting into the loop engineering stuff. Like I've tried a little bit with Claude Cowork with mixed success, but I think like figuring out whatever my next like kind of side project prototype is going to be, and see if I can like actually do some real loop engineering, so that it like is self-improving and iterates through all the issues. That's next up for sure.
Yeah, we've been internally in Raidguild. We've been working on something that is a workflow manager and manages spawning multiple workflows and loops in a kind of auditable, shareable way with the community.
Cool.
So that could be something to share to you if you want to go down that rabbit hole.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks again for coming by today.
No, anytime. Yeah, it's good to chat with you guys.
Yeah, let's talk again soon.
Definitely.